The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday. It's Friday. What a week. Whew. Friday, February 21st, and we are back. Still talking about basically the same stories. There's just things move so quickly, I mean they move so quickly, circling around in circles over the same stuff over and over and over again. But there you are. So we're going to talk about Hamas. We'll talk about Ukraine, Trump, and most importantly, I think ultimately Europe. We'll talk about Bannon. Did he do it or didn't he do it? I think he did. We'll talk about Trump's executive order around government agencies. Really interesting. We'll talk about the budget as coming through the Senate and the economy. Kelo, a case that is being revisited by the Supreme Court, which is interesting. And finally, we'll talk about, I don't know what we call it, a miracle of science. Science. Yeah. We'll talk about that. And then, yeah, if we have time, we'll talk about some other stuff. But that's a big scale. That's a lot. There's a lot there. But we have time. No rush today. We're here for the duration. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Primarily, if you're asking with $20 or more. So, step in and shape the second half of the show based on what you would like. That is, based on your questions. I will answer them all, read them all, comment on them all. So any topic that you would like or disagreement or something you want to say. Much safer to do in the super chat than in the regular chat, which I have a hard time reading as I'm trying to speak and read and comment and hard. All right, let's jump in. God. So we now know how the two young children, babies really, one baby, one young child, were murdered by Hamas. Their bodies were returned yesterday. We also know, I can't remember if I said this was known on the show yesterday, but that the body of the mother is not the mother. Hamas returned some other body, some woman. Nobody knows who that is. And Hamas has acknowledged that they knew that. They try to pull it over. Not sure exactly what's going on. But who knows what the condition of the body of the mother is, or who knows? Who knows? I mean, one shudders to even think about why they wouldn't want to return the body of the mother, because it's in such bad shape because of the horrific things they did to it. They put another woman's body in there. They put clothes on it, and they sent it over as if Israel wouldn't notice. They thought they'd fool them. But forensic tests have now been done on the two children. It turns out they were both killed, murdered, in November, right after they were taken hostage, about a month after. It turns out that they were both strangled to death. So some Hamas barbarian put his hands around the neck of a 5 months old baby and killed it. Same was done with his brother, only under 2 years old, strangled to death. Little children. They were probably making too much noise to the Hamas, so they were fooling around. They weren't following. They don't understand, right? And they just killed them. And then, just to double up, then they mutilated the bodies to make it look like they'd been killed by maybe an aerial strike or something like that. So the bodies that were returned to Israel, completely mutilated. But, forensic science today is sophisticated enough to be able to attain the time of death, but also what actually they died from. You can tell by which organs shut down and so on. And it's I think quite evident that these little babies were strangled to death. One wonders, was this done in front of the mother? What did they do to the mother? It's better not to think about it, I guess. This is one area where you want to go, shut off that mind, shut off the imagination, because it's a place you don't really want to go. It is so horrific and so horrible. They then, as we talked about yesterday, paraded the bodies around before they handed it off over to the Red Cross and to Israel. They had the Red Cross participate in a little ceremony of a handover, while a huge contingent of Palestinians cheered them on, cheered the whole thing on, and celebrated the death of these babies. There's also, I don't know if this is verified, I don't know if they actually know, but there's also good reason to believe that these babies were strangled by just Palestinian civilians and not necessarily by Hamas militants, Hamas terrorists, people who were uniform. But it's not clear to me that they know it definitively, but it doesn't really matter. The reality is that they were taken hostage by so-called civilians, but the reality is that there are no civilians in Gaza. That Gaza is completely militarized, that the population in Gaza completely supports Hamas, that the population in Gaza is morally responsible for the atrocities that Hamas has committed. Nobody among the civilian population has helped the Israelis find the hostages, in spite of $5 million and a resettlement bonus. We're talking here about, it's an insult to the barbarians to call them barbarian. Barbarians, weren't the barbarians like a tribe in Central Europe, like the Vandals and the barbarians? And these are monsters, subhumans. And these are monsters, subhumans, and who have not evolved ideologically, intellectually, emotionally since the Dark Ages. They are as barbaric as the barbarians were, as horrific as any barbarians were in all of human history. These are people that need to be crushed. They need to be defeated. I say this over and over again, but you got to say it over and over again. They need to be brought to their knees. They need to be humiliated. They need to be taught a lesson. You behave like this. You treat other human beings like this. You are going to be destroyed. And, we will see what next steps are, of course. We will see what happens. Tomorrow, I think 6 live hostages are supposed to be released. There might be some more bodies to be released next week, and then phase 1 is over. And at that point, negotiations around phase 2 begin, and Hamas will still hold 60 hostages, of which 30 are alive, or approximately 30 are alive, not exactly sure how many. They're never going to release the hostages. They're never going to release all of them. That's just a given that they're never going to release all of them. Because as soon as they release them all, they lose whatever leverage they have on Israel. I'm hopeful. In my view, once the 6 live hostages are brought out, and then maybe when Hamas holds the ceremony with their last bodies that they release next week, during that ceremony, Israel should frigging carpet bomb the ceremony and end it there, invade Gaza, shut off the water, shut off the food, shut off the aid, shut off the cell phone coverage, shut off the internet, and finish the job. Finish the job. And then, offer them a stipend to relocate. Of course, remember, Israel offered them $5 million for information about the hostages and relocation, and nobody came forward. So it doesn't look like any of them are brave enough to actually take up the offer, and it doesn't look like any of them actually want to go anywhere. But just remember who these people are. These are people who strangle babies, rape their mothers. I don't know if they raped the mother here, but they certainly raped enough mothers on October 7th. They burn people alive, they torture them, and they love it. They love it. They celebrate it. And, my guess is if you went to the West Bank and you went to the Gaza right now and you interviewed, quote, civilians and asked them, what do you think of all these things? They'd all say, yeah, it's good. That's what the Israelis deserve. That is the state of mind. That state of mind needs to be changed, shook up completely. And only complete defeat, only Israeli complete, unequivocal victory will achieve that. Also yesterday, in the midst of the bodies being released, it was last night it was discovered that bombs had been planted in buses south of Tel Aviv. Luckily, the explosive devices exploded, in an empty bus lot without anybody on board. If they had exploded, and they destroyed the buses completely. Buses were incinerated. So you can imagine if these buses had been driven off the lot the next morning, filled up with passengers, and then the explosion would have happened, you would have had yesterday a mass casualty event in Israel with women, children, men, everybody in multiple buses. I think 3 exploded. They found another 2 devices in 2 other buses. They have linked this to a terrorist cell out of Tulkarem, a refugee camp in the West Bank. As far as I can tell, Israeli military is in Tulkarem as we speak. But what this means really, and remember when everybody used to attack me because I used to say a fence doesn't work, fences don't work, border walls don't work. What's the point? It's a stupid policy. It's a bad policy. It's a policy of defeat and surrender. And people said, yeah, but Israel has a wall and a fence. And I said, well, and it's useless. And whenever the Third Intifada or whatever starts again, they will discover it's useless. The idea that the Palestinians can't get into Israel because there's a fence is nutty. Plus, they have allies within Israel. It is suspected that an Israeli, actually an Israeli Jew helped them plant these devices. Anyway, it's time to knock down the fence. It's time for Israel to take full control over the entire West Bank. It's time for Israel to enter all the Palestinian towns and cities, to enter the refugee camps, to root out the terrorists, to disarm the population, and I include here the Palestinian Authority that is obviously incompetent, and completely take over the West Bank, be responsible for law and order in the West Bank, and again, disarm the entire population there. And, and make sure, by whatever means they need to do it, that arms are not smuggled in from Jordan, which has a long border with Israel along the Jordan River, and that this population is pacified. And that will probably mean arresting all the murderers and terrorists that Israel's been releasing in the last few weeks in order to get its hostages back. So that is what I hope will happen, think will happen, but, well, I don't think it will happen. I hope it'll happen. I've given up hoping that my vision for an Israeli victory will be materialized. I'm eager following this weekend to see what the Saudi-Egyptian plan for Gaza is going to be. I'm curious to see what Trump's response to that plan is going to be. But my vision for victory, I've given up hope to see it materialize. By the way, one essential part of victory of the Palestinians has to be the complete destruction of any ability of the Iranian regime to project force. And that doesn't just mean the nuclear facilities. It means their facilities to launch missiles. It means the destruction of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It means the destruction of their navy. It means a wholesale destruction of the military capabilities of the Iranian regime. And Israel could do that. It could take months, and it could be very expensive. The United States could do it in days, but you know, what's the chance actually that will happen? All right, let's move from one horrific injustice to the next. And here you have to give kudos. I have to give kudos to a newspaper I don't usually give kudos to, but a newspaper that has been pretty MAGA and pretty consistently pro-Trump, and yet ran a headline today. Not just a headline, because it ran the whole front page of the New York Post. Where is the picture of that? I don't have the picture of it. I just have the article in front of me. I don't have the picture of it. But the whole front page is something like, Putin is the capitalized dictator. Putin is the dictator, with a picture of Putin. And they ran that as a headline. And that was linked to an excellent, as usual, from Murray. And I don't agree with everything Douglas Murray writes in this, but Douglas Murray is so good. You got to give him immense credit. Again, I don't agree with everything Douglas Murray has said and written in the past. I don't agree with everything, even in the article. But this was like, what a breath of fresh air. If you, I'm going to read big chunks of it to you, so I guess you don't have to go find it, but it is worth going and find it just to be inspired by the fact that somebody has the balls, the guts to write an op-ed like this, and then somebody has the balls and guts to publish it in spite of being so-called affiliated with Trump. So Douglas Murray has just gone from one achievement to the next. His defense of Israel was unbelievable. His attack on Hamas and the Palestinians, great, and now this article is spectacular. Ian corrects me. The picture, the whole front page is a picture of Putin, and the title is "This is a Dictator." All right, the article itself is 10 Ukraine-Russian war truths we ignore at our peril. I'm going to read them to you, 10. And this is good. I know I've said all this, but Douglas Murray has a way of putting it all together nicely, concretizing it nicely, putting it into one article, and getting it published in a way that at least everybody on the right is going to see it, because people on the right tend to read the New York Post. Truth number 1. Vladimir Putin started this war, despite what Trump said days ago. He goes on. In February 2022, following a massive buildup on the Ukrainian borders, Putin's army launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There is no rational narrative outside of Russian propaganda that blames aggressive actions by Ukrainian President Zelensky or NATO that can justify such a military action. And of course, this came after Putin had already seized Crimea in 2014 and launched a war in Donbass in eastern Ukraine. And this, of course, doesn't even include the fact that he'd already launched a war in 2008 against Georgia. That's in there. So that's truth number one, which Trump denied the other day. Truth number two, Russia is fighting for conquest. The Russian Federation invaded Ukraine in 2022. Whatever you think of the country or its leadership, Ukraine is a sovereign nation. Putin invaded in the hope of devouring the country wholesale. Ukraine, on the other hand, he says has absolutely no territorial ambitions in Russia. And he reminds us, remember the brutality of Russia's actions. Among the multitude of depravities and war crimes committed by Putin's army has been the abduction of some 20,000 Ukrainian children. Who wants to live in a world where the strong can simply devour the weak and kidnap little children by the thousands? Why hasn't the U.S. put their release at the top of the list of its negotiating demands? Because Trump and Vance and Hegseth and Marco Rubio don't care. Truth number three, Ukraine is fighting for its independence. Most Ukrainians do not want to be part of Russia. They do not want to be governed from Moscow. The vast majority want to live in an independent, sovereign country in control of its own future. And I would add, with an affiliation with the West, which is what really ticks Putin off, a country that is affiliated in one way or the other with the West, with Europe, with the United States, not with Russia. Truth number four, Ukrainians are not Russians. Now, Ukrainians and Russians are not one people, a single whole, as Putin wrote in the 2021 essay. Now, I don't know of anybody else other than Douglas Murray and myself who've actually read that essay. I don't see it quoted anywhere else. This is the first time I've seen the essay quoted. I was actually Googling Vladimir Putin, speeches, essays on Ukraine pre-2022. And I found the essay published on the Kremlin website, translated into English by the Russians. Truth number five, Putin is a dictator. Putin has ruled Russia with an iron KGB fist since coming to power in 1999. He has ruthlessly quashed independent media, ended free and fair elections, crushed civil society, and killed his political opponents. And not just inside Russia, but around the world. People who live inside Russia and expect any opposition to the war are imprisoned. Truth number six, Zelensky is not a dictator. A political outsider, Zelensky won 2019 presidential election, which was relatively free and fair. He has 57% approval rating, not the 4% Trump claimed. Unlike in Russia, Ukraine has a vibrant, independent media. In other words, don't believe the Russian bots. Don't believe J.D. Vance, who might be a Russian bot. Don't believe Trump. Don't believe the Russian propaganda. Ukraine has a vibrant, this is Douglas Murray, who's been to Ukraine several times since the war began. Ukraine has a vibrant independent media that hold the government to account, despite claims to the contrary by internet swamp creatures and Russian bots. Many Ukrainians freely criticized the government's conduct of the war. When Britain was fighting for its survival against the Nazis in the 1940s, it too did not hold elections. The Russian ambassador to the UK spent yesterday crowing that he's not sure Zelensky would get re-elected if there were elections today. But one thing we know for sure, whether or not Zelensky would be re-elected in Ukraine, Putin will be re-elected in Russia, no matter what. Because his elections are con job, pageant show. Putin hasn't won a free and fair election in his life because he doesn't hold free and fair elections. Truth number 7. Russia is not a friend of the U.S. It is a hostile, nuclear-armed state that resents American power and the world the U.S. has built. It has ever closer relations with China, Iran, and North Korea. In fact, all of its main friends are countries that are the biggest foes of America. Truth number 8. Ukraine is a friend of the United States. Ukraine wants to be part of the American-led order. Its people and government are deeply pro-American. Since the start of the Russian invasion, the Ukrainian men and women have been fighting at the front lines of fighting the Russian military to protect their loved ones and their country. They also do it in the knowledge that if they fall, other countries will be next. Truth number 9. Putin cannot be trusted. This isn't just a statement of fact, it is something that 81% of American voters agree on. Putin has invaded multiple countries in violation of every international treaty. He has interfered in multiple elections in his nearest neighbors. He has violated international agreements, including the INF Treaty with the U.S. He has lied to the American presidents and European leaders his whole career. He has lied to Trump even since Trump has been back in office. Most recently, Putin promised that he wouldn't target Ukrainian energy facilities. And Lavrov declared that they never did target them. Yet, this week, he carried out a massive missile drone attack against multiple energy facilities, for example. Truth number 10. American aid to Ukraine is not being wasted. Nobody would argue that Ukraine is a country without corruption. But that does not mean its people and sovereignty should not be protected. We should also remember which country in this war is truly corrupt. Russia is one vast kleptocratic state led by Putin and a small circle of oligarchs who have made themselves among the richest people on earth, all while keeping most of the Russian population in a state of poverty that would not be believed by most of us in the West. And this is in spite of what Tucker Carlson tells you. Putin and his cronies have been accumulating power and wealth all their careers, and they will torture and kill anyone who exposes this corruption. Remember his political opponent, Alexei Navalny, and the lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky. But you don't just have to remember them. Remember all the people falling out of windows. It is easy to expose corruption in Ukraine, but in Russia, it is deadly. Besides, according to the Department of Defense, some $58 billion of the $183 billion in Ukrainian aid has been spent in America. It is money that has benefited American workers and industries. That is by building weapon systems. The war has also degraded the military of one of the most despotic regimes in the world, reduced its threat to not only Europe but America, without one U.S. soldier being killed. It has also sent a strong deterrent message to China, Iran, and North Korea not to try the same thing. You can criticize Zelensky, but we should be under no illusion about who started this fire and who the true dictator or villain of this tragic tale is. I think it's excellent good for Douglas Murray, and it's a really, really, really rare event to see this. Now, it's true. I mentioned Mark Levin wrote an article supporting Ukraine the other day, also in the New York Post. I don't think it was this good. And also, Mark Levin claims that MAGA doesn't support Putin. I don't think that's true. If you look at the MAGA spokesman out there, if you look at the MAGA people, MAGA fully supports Trump on this and fully supports Putin on this and fully supports Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen to separate MAGA from Tucker Carlson, to separate MAGA from Donald Trump's view of Putin. I mean, I really think that Mark Levin thinks he represents MAGA, but Mark Levin is delusional. Mark Levin is far too pro-free markets and far too pro-freedom to really represent MAGA. As Mark Levin will discover, if he hasn't discovered yet, MAGA will turn against him, maybe already has turned against him, given his position on Ukraine. I still don't know what Ben Shapiro's position is. Is anybody up to speed on how Ben Shapiro is covering the last week of events between Zelensky and Trump? It would be interesting. All right. So just some updates on what is actually going on. But again, Douglas Murray's article, New York Post, worth reading, worth retweeting, worth sending to your friends, worth highlighting, worth making accessible to as many people as possible to combat the irrationality that's being spread by Trump and Elon Musk and J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance constantly is tweeting about this, writing about this. And who else? J.D. Vance and pretty much the entire leadership of MAGA. Yeah. Mark says, Shapiro posted on Facebook today. It would be interesting to read his post. It's taking him a while. He has to be careful. See, Ben Shapiro knows that he has to be careful. If his audience is MAGA, and it is, he has to be very, very careful. He could lose that audience very quickly. Just ask, what's his name from, God. Anyway, it'll come to me. But people who turn against Trump don't survive. MAGA turns on them very quickly. All right. A few things. Macron from France and Keith Starmer from the UK are coming to visit Trump next week. Well, that's nice that Shapiro called out the lie that Zelensky started the war. What else? Did he call out the lie that Zelensky's a dictator? Did he call out the friendliness with which Trump treats Putin? Did he call out any of this stuff? The stuff that we've been talking about for a week now. So Macron and Starmer are coming to visit Trump. Trump today said that neither of them have done enough have done anything to end the war in Ukraine. If you remember, Macron, who I don't particularly like, but Macron was shuttling between, went to see Putin to try to stop the war from happening. Do you remember he sat at that long desk? Putin had him on one end and Putin was on the other end, and one of the most humiliating photos I've ever seen. So, Trump is already dissing the Europeans, or has been dissing them all week. Trump also said last night that Zelensky has no cards. He has no negotiating cards. So he shouldn't be in the meetings. There's no reason for him to be in the meetings where negotiations about his country happen. We don't need them. We don't need them. Different countries in Europe now are trying to position themselves in different ways. I mean, everybody is kind of feeling like we don't want to lose the American relationship, but we might be losing the American relationship, and we have to appease Trump, but we don't want to appease Trump. And I mean, they're struggling. Everybody in Europe right now is struggling to figure out what to do with the U.S. what was interesting yesterday was to read what Trump's envoy to Ukraine said yesterday. General, God, I forgot his name now. I thought I had it in front of me. Let me. Eagle, was it Eagle? Who basically said that Zelensky is incredibly courageous and is a courageous leader and was very friendly and very positive. And they were going to have a press conference, Zelensky and Trump's emissary to Ukraine. And Kellogg, thank you, Kellogg, yes, General Kellogg. And Trump canceled the press conference. He wouldn't let him do the press conference. So you're undermining your own people, right? Indeed, I think that the press is saying the extent of Kellogg's influence on U.S.-Ukrainian relationship is questionable. Yeah, that's saying something. It's much worse than questionable. He has no influence. He is being sidelined completely from all negotiations. All right. So I said a little bit about this yesterday. I'm going to say it again today because I think this is an important point. There is one good thing that can come out of all of this. And it can come out of all of this no matter what Trump does, in spite of Trump, despite Trump. And the one good thing that can come out of this is Europe. And I know this is a little science fiction, and I know this is hard to imagine, but Europe actually developing a backbone. Europe actually working towards defending itself, building up a military, and having a backbone. The assumed next Prime Minister of Germany, yesterday, or maybe it was earlier today, basically said that it's time for Germany to engage in discussions with France and the United Kingdom regarding a nuclear strategy. Remember, the only two countries in Europe who have nukes that are theirs, not Americans, are France and the UK. Well, maybe they need to start coming up with a strategy around a nuclear umbrella provided by the UK and France. He acknowledged the fact that Macron has been talking about this for a while now, and that Germany has turned him down. And maybe it's time that the French protect the Germans. There's a thought for you. This will bring Europe together. That the French actually protect the Germans. So this is going to be really interesting as European leaders come to the realization they cannot rely on Trump and potentially any future American leader helping them. They must find a way to unite. They must find a way to unite against a common enemy. They must find a way to unite for their own security. They must find a way to unite around some idea of European civilization and what it means and the values that it represents. Now, they need to rediscover some of those values. And, you know, Germany, with new leadership, might be the country to help bring this along. Although, again, the person who has been most responsible for this, most aggressive about talking about this in the past, even before this current crisis, has been Macron, who is very unpopular in France, but might be a leader who's needed in Europe right now, as much as it hurts me to say that, because he's such a middle-of-the-road, nothing pragmatist. But that's better than what else France has to offer, I guess, these days. Macron has also said now, again, yesterday or this morning, that France would consider raising its military spending from 2.1% of GDP to 5% of GDP. 5% is more than the United States. Particularly if the United States starts withdrawing troops from Europe. Now, I think this is the best outcome possible. The best outcome possible is for the United States to withdraw troops from Europe. to withdraw troops from Europe, and for the Europeans to pick up defense spending, for the Europeans to establish a unified military force, and to take on the responsibility of defending Europe from Russia, from China, from Iran, from whoever, themselves. And hopefully they would be allied with the United States. Hopefully this is not a play that puts them at odds, but that they take on the full responsibility themselves. World War II is long past. The need for a United States nuclear umbrella has long passed. Indeed, Denmark's prime minister has said that she's immediately increasing, well, it's going to take some time, but between now and 2026, military spending will rise from 2.4% to 3%. And then she said she wants the money spent quickly on buying weapon systems as quickly as possible. To quote her, buy. If we can't get the best equipment, buy the next best. There's only one thing that matters now, and that's speed. You can imagine that stocks of, weapons manufacturers in Sweden and the UK, in other parts of Europe, are going up. My guess is that you will also see a very high demand for South Korean weapon systems. South Korea makes very, very good weapon systems, tanks, airplanes, and Europeans might want to skip the U.S., partially because in the U.S. there's a bottleneck, and partially because they don't want to be reliant on the U.S. And you'd expect the Israeli defense industry to be a huge beneficiary of all of this. You would expect that these European countries would be buying Israeli air defense systems, buying maybe, I don't know if Israel can manufacture them fast enough, Israeli tanks, but Israel has a vast array of weapon systems that would benefit the Europeans enormously, and again, diversify their dependence on the U.S. One interesting aspect of this is of the whole thing going on right now is the one country that has stood by Ukraine has been Turkey. Erdogan. So I'm not sure exactly how he's playing this. So he's on the European side, not on the American side. I'm not sure what that gives him exactly and what benefits that provides him. Maybe in the short run, he wants to get closer to Europe. Certainly his economy needs it. But why is he making an enemy of Russia for himself? I don't know what the geopolitical considerations of Turkey are right now to be siding in such a way. So there is a major impetus, whether it would be acted on or not. There's a major impetus right now for a complete restructuring, a complete rethinking of Europe, of the military status of Europe, their dependence on the United States, the relationship between the countries, and the relationship with them and the UK, because the UK is not part of the EU, but it is part of Europe. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see how all this plays out and what happens. And I think a big part of this, is going to be the election in 2 days. On Sunday, you have national elections in Germany. The expectation is that the center-right political party will win with something like 29% of the vote. They will have to form a coalition in order to create a government. Now, who can they form a coalition with? The number two party is going to be the AfD. The center-right and the center-left political parties have sworn that they will not form a government with the AfD. They will not bring the AfD into government. But will they have enough votes, the center-left, center-right, to form a government between the two of them? That depends on what happens to the small parties that are running, the Greens, the Liberal Party, the kind of the free market type party, and a couple of leftist parties. If those parties do not get enough votes to get in, then it's likely that the two centrist parties will have enough votes in order to form a coalition. If they do get in, then the two centrist parties will have to bring in a partner from one of these small parties, and that's not going to be easy, and it's not going to allow them to actually do what they would like to do. So the election Sunday going to be super important. We'll talk about them Monday on the show. Just so you know, AFD announced today, I guess, as part of their campaign, that if they won the election, they would hold a referendum in Germany to leave the EU. That is their motivation, their goal, what they would like to do is to leave the EU. Indeed, they have said, and it's part of their charter, it's part of their agenda, that they would like to be part of, they would like very close relationship with Russia. They are huge admirers of Putin. This is AFD that Elon Musk encourages everybody to vote for, that J.D. Vance encouraged, again, to be tolerant of. They are acolytes. They are admirers of Vladimir Putin. That's the state of the world. And they will be, at the very least, the second largest political party in Germany after Sunday's election. At least that is the expectation. A horrific turn of events. Horrific turn of events. I'm just going to take these comments from Mark Goodwood just because they're relevant to what we're talking about in their answers to kind of questions that I asked. According to Shapiro, he says Zelensky allowed this war to go on when it could have been avoided. Absolutely, he could have surrendered at any point in time over the last 3 years. President Trump is calling that out. Yep, he's eager to call it out and encourage Zelensky to surrender now. The goal is peace, not an endless conflict funded by American taxpayers. No, the goal is the eradication of Ukraine. The goal is handing over Ukraine to Russia. The goal is the elimination of Ukraine as a nation, and the elimination of its sovereignty. And clearly, the goal is to hand Ukraine over to Russia. That is Russia's goal, always has been. And by supporting Putin, Trump has fulfilled or expressed support for Putin's aims and Putin's goals. And yes, Trump, in the meantime, would like all the natural resources to be handed over to the United States. But that's part of this economic deal that he's going to have with Russia. He doesn't even need Zelensky for that because he's basically handing Ukraine to Russia. To argue that Zelensky could have ended the war at any time is a disgrace, anti-historical, anti-principled, despicable idea. You're attacked. You could end the war anytime by surrendering. You can end the war anytime by laying down your weapons and let the enemy take you over. You can end the war anytime by giving up 20% of your own territory. You can end the war anytime by giving up on the 20,000 children that have been kidnapped. You can end the war anytime by rolling over and pretending you're dead, by not fighting for your freedom or your liberty, by not leading your people and trying to win this, and funded by American taxpayers as if, that is a bad thing. American taxpayers who get to fund the annihilation, or not annihilation, but the degradation of the Russian army, which is clearly in America's interest. Why does America care if the war continues indefinitely? Again, you could have withdrawn support financially without forcing Ukraine to surrender, which is what Trump is doing. It's not about money. It never was about money. It's never been about money. All these right-wingers, all these MAGA critics of the war in Ukraine always claim it's money. Has nothing to do with money. They have no problem spending tens of billions and billions and billions of dollars on all kinds of things, like building a stupid wall on the Mexican border. It's never about money. This has always been about the fawning love affair that they have with Putin, the admiration that they have for a dictator, the respect they have for a strongman, the hatred that you're seeing right now, the hatred they have for Western Europeans because they're leftists. Russia already has Crimea. It had Eastern Donbass. And yet, Putin still invaded. And if you remember, when he invaded, he went for Kiev and Kharkiv. So, what negotiation, what deal was going to happen? He already had Crimea. The only thing Zelensky could have done is surrendered. And by doing so, he would have surrendered Ukraine to Russia. I mean, this is going to happen. I told you already, within 4 years, the next election, Ukraine will be governed by a Russian puppet. And that was always the intent. Trump knows it. Everybody knows it. They don't care. They love Putin too much. And I'm serious. Trump loves Putin or is afraid of him or intimidated by him. Whatever it is, Trump and Putin are together. You saw this in that meeting they had in 2018. You see it, and every time Trump talks about Putin, the admiration, the respect, he is what Trump would like to be. You can pretend that's not the case as much as you want, but that's who Trump would love to be. He certainly would like that body. Mark also says, Victor Davis Hanson says, Trump's strategy for Russia and Ukraine focuses on quick negotiations, recognizing Russia's control on Donbass and Crimea while preserving in Ukraine's sovereignty elsewhere. Really, that's why you call Zelensky a dictator. That's why you say Ukraine started the war. I mean, Victor Davis Hanson has become nothing other than, and he did the same thing in the first Trump administration, a mouthpiece for Trump, a rationalizer, an evader for Trump. As much as I respect Victor Davis Hanson as an historian, he has lost his mind. He's become Trump mindlessness syndrome. As soon as a Trump topic comes up, he will do everything to defend Trump. He will say anything and evade and lie in doing so in order to defend Trump. I mean, this is Victor Davis Hanson, who understands militaries, who understands Russia, who knows Putin and knows his evil, who knows that, also knows that Putin cannot sustain this war forever. This is Victor Davis Hanson, who knows how to win wars. And he's given up because Trump said so. I mean, these are people I had some respect for Ben, none at this point, because he's become a complete Trump acolyte. Victor Davis Hanson still wrote some of the best, most influential books in military history, on me at least, and he'll always have my respect for that, but he just gets worse and worse and worse in his, TMS, Trump mindlessness syndrome. And also, he lost my respect a long time ago because of his immigration stance. His immigration stance is awful. Even before Trump, his immigration stance was awful. Talk about awful human beings. Somebody I've been talking about for 8-9 years, since he ran Trump's campaign and was a senior advisor to Trump in the first administration, and that is Steve Bannon, a real fascist, a religious theocratic monster. Steve Bannon is the leader of MAGA, much more than Mark Levin is. Mark Levin? Mark Levin is marginal as compared to Steve Bannon. Bannon, funnily enough, hates Elon Musk, so that's the one thing separates him from Trump these days, is he really despises Elon Musk. He's called him names. He has fought with him. And yet yesterday, he followed Elon Musk on the stage at CPAC, the big the big, what do you call it, conservative show. The big conservative event. It used to be a conservative event. And I even went to CPAC once. And it's become a MAGA event. The biggest MAGA event in the country. It brings all the MAGA politicians. It brings everybody over. Foreign right-wing dignitaries come over and they speak. And yesterday, Milei handed Elon Musk a chainsaw, and Elon Musk with sunglasses was running around with this chainsaw. It was really ridiculous. Anyway, Bannon got up on stage and gave his typically fiery speech. And at the end of the speech, he was really getting into it. And he was going, the only way that they win is if we retreat. We are not going to retreat. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to quit. We're going to fight, fight, fight. And just at the end of the fight, his hand went up to the upper right, palm down, unquestionably a Nazi salute, right? I mean, I did not think what Elon Musk was doing was a Nazi salute, but this one, I mean, Bannon's smart. This was clearly staged. He wasn't like waving at the audience. He wasn't doing anything like that. The hand was straight. The palm was down. It was outstretched. It was unequivocally a Nazi salute. And the audience went wild. They went wild. They went crazy, applauding and yelling and everything. This is a CPAC. Audience went crazy. Well, this was too much. This salute of Bannon's was too much. Is Alexis on here? I don't know if Alexis is here. Alexis is the only person I know from French origin who I think I saw him earlier on the chat. This was too much for the French far-right leader, Jordan Bardella, is that how you pronounce it? Who is the young guy from Le Pen's political party, right? This is the far-right in France. They thought Bannon went too far. It was so offensive to Jordan Bardella that he withdrew from the conference and refused to speak. He canceled the speaking engagement. He was already in Washington, D.C., and he left the conference. We're talking about a real right-wing firebrand. Young, if they ever win, he would be prime minister. So, Alexis says here, he says, to scare the French far right, you have to go pretty far. Well, Steve Bannon scared the French far right. Bannon later on, I don't have this. Oh, here it is. Let me just open this story up because I didn't open it up. Bannon later on, when he heard about this, when he heard that Bannon said, oh no, this is just a wave. I was just waving. I always do that at the end of my speeches. But Bannon immediately said that Bardon is a child. I mean, he's very young. He looks very young, anyway. He said he was talking to Le Point, I guess a French newspaper. Bannon attacked Bardella for the decision to withdraw from the CPAC, saying he was, quote, wetting himself like a little child. I think he's 29. Yeah, I think, Alexei, you're right. I think he's 29. He's wetting himself like a little child. This was Bannon's response. Oh yeah, I guess it's on video on Twitter. Bannon, who looks like a nutcase. He's got 3 pens in his shirt. He looks weird. Anyway, I thought that would be the latest confrontation between the U.S. and France, the French far right considers MAGA too far right for it and have left the conference. God. I give kudos to Baldella because, as far as I know, nobody else left the conference because of Steve Bannon. So I give him a lot of credit. Kudos to him. Good for him. By the way, just Bannon also. I don't know when did he actually say this. Recently, Bannon has called Elon Musk a parasitic, illegal immigrant who acts as God. He thinks here it is, the full quote. Musk is a parasitic illegal immigrant. He wants to impose his freak experiments and act as God without any respect for the country's history, values, or traditions. Steve Bannon, ladies and gentlemen, major influencer in MAGA Nation. Yeah, I mean, I think Alexis is right. Alexis writes here that the context for this, for Baldella's walking out, is that Le Pen's party is trying to gain respectability. It's trying to present themselves as not a far-right political party, but as a kind of a center-right, respectable. They hold strong views, but, she has very much distanced herself, or tried to at least, of her father's explicit anti-Semitism. She has, unlike the AfD, she has kicked out explicit fascists and Nazi sympathizers from her political party. So she is really trying to present a cleaned up, respectable version to the French voting public, with the idea that she has a real chance of beating Macron in the next election. All right, we still have a lot to cover. Yeah, we've done 3 out of 9 topics. The other ones are shorter. But I did want to remind you, because I see you're falling asleep a little bit here, and we have 200 people watching on YouTube. A lot of you watching have never supported the show before, and this is a listener, watcher supported show. Cannot exist without the support from you. And I'm sure of the 200 people out there that are watching right now on YouTube, not to mention the 200 plus people watching it on Twitter, there are many of you who have never actually supported the show financially. And but you make it possible. Without that support, it doesn't happen. And remember, you are gaining values. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Hopefully, you're gaining a value, if only to know what I say so you can hate it. Value for value. You should repay a value with a value. I'm asking you to be traders, to be engaged in trade. So I'm particularly eager to see a bunch of first-time super chats, because I know there are a lot of you first-timers. Also, there might be some people out there right now listening. I see you're dropping because I'm asking you for money. But there's some people out there listening who are not subscribers. Please consider subscribing. That way you'll find out when I go live. You'll be notified. So please subscribe, and like the show before you leave. That helps the algorithm promote the show. So if you like the show, please like it. But in the meantime, not only can you do a sticker to support the show, but you can do a super chat question. And that way you can get me to talk about the things that interest you, or you can comment and I can comment on your commentary. And we can go on like that. Cool. All right. So thank you, John. Thank you, Finn Harper, and thank you, Martin, for responding with stickers. I very much appreciate that. All right, let's move on. One of the executive orders that Trump signed the other day, and I think he signed a series of them, but that all amount to the same thing, is that Trump is basically arguing for a new, if you will, constitutional interpretation of the division of powers that exist today in America. And this, by the way, is one of the positive things that Trump has done. As I've said, Trump has done positive things, and this is one of the positives. today there is a sense in which we do not have three branches of government. Today we very much have four branches of government. We have a legislature, an executive, and a court system, a court system. But we also have what some call the administrative state, the regulatory agencies, the independent agencies. These are agencies that Congress has been creating since the 1930s and been granting these agencies independence from the executive. In a sense, they run themselves by themselves. Now, the executive gets to appoint the people who run it, but the agencies are not under the authority, the managerial authority of the executive, of the president. Basically, Congress has delegated the authority of the executive to run certain agencies and delegated the authority of their legislation to allow the agencies to set rules by themselves. And this has been confirmed by the courts as okay, as consistent with the Constitution for now almost 90 years. Now, there's been some erosion to this with this court. We saw that in basically them stepping away from the Chevron decision, stepping away from granting that the courts grant the basically the regulatory agencies, what do you call it? The responsibility of basically interpreting the laws. The court said no. The job of interpreting the law is not the agency. The job of interpreting the law is on the court. And that was a revolution. Chevron was a decision from the 1980s, authored by Justice Scalia, surprisingly from a conservative judge. But it basically allowed even more independence to the regulatory agencies than they had before. And here I'm talking about the multitude of alphabet agencies, from the SEC to the FCC to the FDA to the whatever, right? The dozens of these, dozens. And they all have a large degree of independence from the political world, from either the legislature or the executive. Well, Trump has basically signed a number of executive orders that basically say, oh, no. Independent agencies are basically under the White House control. They are part of the executive. They are part of our government. They are not a fourth branch of government. They are part of the executive branch of government. They're part of the presidency. They cannot legislate. That the court has already decided, right? They cannot legislate outside of the specifics that Congress has allowed them and what the president supports. Now, this is a real reordering of, again, kind of the constitutional order in America. It's a return to a pre-progressive era, pre-Woodrow Wilson and certainly FDR state of the world. And it is a long time coming. Now, all of this is going to go to courts. The agencies, plenty of people are going to sue on behalf of the agencies to preserve their independence. And the courts ultimately going to have to decide what the new constitutional order should be. And I think that there's a good chance that the courts actually decide that, no, there is no fourth branch of government. I mean, this is certainly Gorsuch and Thomas are going to vote that way. Gorsuch is I've talked about this in the past many, many times. Gorsuch is a massive opponent of the regulatory state, the administrative state. He's a massive opponent of these regulatory agencies. Now, this is not draining the swamp, by the way, as Wanda Freeman says, because the agencies will still be there. It's not dismantling the agencies. It's not eliminating cronyism. It's not eliminating the bureaucracy. It's clarifying who the bureaucracy is responsible to. So, for example, Trump's order requires the agencies to submit proposed and final rules to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in the White House. That office is part of the Office of Management and Budget. They will review the laws to make sure they're consistent with cost-benefit analysis, legal analysis, and they hew to the president's priorities. And that is fine. So this places the responsibility of executing the law written by Congress to the president, to the executive branch. It doesn't change the fact that there'll be a gazillion regulations, and there'll be lots of bureaucrats, and the government, and there'll be lots and lots and lots of swamp animals eagerly trying to influence decisions. It'll just place the ultimate decision-making authority at a political entity, the presidency, rather than at an administrative level, the people who run the agencies. It also states the executive order that the Office of Management and Budget shall establish performance standards and management objectives for independent heads. And then it should adjust their funding by activity, function, project, or object as necessary and appropriate to advance the president's policies and priorities. Now, I think there's some issues there, right? Because it's not about the president's policies and priorities. This is the imperial presidency, which Trump would like. It should be as necessary and appropriate to fulfill the law and advance the president's policy. But first, it has to be the law, right? And the law might not be consistent with the president's priorities and policies. So the first step has to be the law. Imagine Congress passes a law, the president vetoes it, Congress overrides the veto. Well, the law still has to be followed. That is the primary, not the president's policies and priorities. Hopefully, a court would fix that, would correct that. But I think the thrust, the direction is right. One way or another, these agencies cannot be viewed as independent anymore. Right? Now, of course, they were never really independent. This makes it more explicit than anything else. This is about accountability and the idea that these agencies are accountable to the president. And I think that's absolutely right. And as in terms of restructuring government, this is a major step in the right direction. Now we need to dismantle them and get rid of them. But that requires legislation. All right, so that's the government agencies. That's the executive order by Trump, which of course expands his power, but could have a long-term positive influence on the separation of powers in the United States. All right. I've talked about the budget and the fact that at the end of the day, Elon Musk can go about doing what he's doing with Doge. But at the end of the day, there's a budget, there's a law, a spending law that comes from Congress. And ultimately, it is the executive's responsibility to spend that money as allocated by Congress. And there's a big battle in the House among Republicans on what those spending priorities should be and what the budget should look like. And how do you take the huge tax cut, which is not a real cut, it's just keeping the tax cuts that existed before, plus a few additional elements. How do you keep that and not explode the deficit and cut spending, but cut spending without hooding the priorities of the president? Well, the House has decided to have one big monster bill, which is the approach, I guess, supported by Trump, which will have everything in it. All of Trump's spending priorities, all the stuff they cut, and all the tax stuff. The Senate, in the meantime, wants to pass two bills. One is a spending bill, which is basically spending money for Trump priorities, and then do a tax and other budgetary issues bill. So two bills. Anyway, yesterday, the Senate adopted a budget resolution early on Friday that is an outline of the spending bill that Trump wants. And, you know, this passed 52 to 48, so this Democrats all voted against it. And Rand Paul, who almost always votes against budgets, was the one Republican who voted against the budget resolution. And the reason is that the budget resolution basically spends an extra $300 billion. Believe me, Elon Musk has not even come anywhere close to cutting 10% of $300 billion. But they're already spending a new $300 billion. On what? On two things. On the border, yeah, we're being invaded. Didn't you know? There's an invasion going on. The border's kind of quiet these days, even without a wall. So $300 billion for the border and for defense. So they can increase defense spending. And yet yesterday we heard about a memo that asks everybody in the Defense Department to cut 8%. So they're increasing spending over here, cutting over here. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. They don't care what the right hand is doing. Anyway, Democrats held up this package. They dragged it on as much as they could, but I guess it was an all-nighter, and they got it done. The Republicans are pleased, but now they're getting into the nitty-gritty. This was just the outline of a package. Now they have to get with all the provisions. The Democrats will keep coming up with amendments. They'll try to slow the process down. They'll try to make it as difficult for Republicans as possible to pass this. But yes, the budget process, which ultimately will determine how much money the government spends, is separate, significantly separate from the Doge stuff, which is basically mirrors and lights and fireworks and a big showy display, and is doing very little to actually cut spending. They are cutting people. They're firing a lot of people. Some of them, the next day, they have to rehire because they realize that they fired the wrong people, or they fired people they actually need. But they're firing a lot of people, and I'm all for firing a lot of people. If just fired a bunch of people from the IRS, I'm all for an inefficient IRS, even though I think I'm owed a refund, and I wonder if I'll ever get it, given how inefficient the IRS is going to become. But I'm pretty happy with an inefficient IRS. All right, quickly on the economy. This relates to the budget, and it relates to everything we've talked about. The economy is showing signs of a little slowdown. Hard to tell how serious this is. Hard to tell exactly. Consumer sentiment is way down. Consumer expectations with regard to inflation are way up. The inflation number, of course, we talked about this a few days ago, is higher than what economists expected. And then this morning, we got the BMI, the PMI, Purchasing Manager Index for the service sector, the index, tanked unexpectedly in February. That is, the expectation was that it would go from 52.8 to 53, and instead it dropped to 49.7. Anything below 50 is considered bad, and it hasn't been below 50 since, for 2 years now. So this is an indication of activity. So it's an indication of possible just activity slowdown. The manufacturing PMI rose a little bit, But the services PI declined a lot, much more than, it was expected to go up and it declined. So that was unexpected. And total PMI went down again to 50.4, the lowest it's been since September 2023. Again, small, not huge, small indications that things might be slowing down. And, it's completely understandable why things are slowing down. We've talked about this in the past. U.S. businessmen have no idea what's coming. They don't know if they're going to be tariffs or not be tariffs. If they're going to be tariffs, on whom, how much, which products, which countries, for how long. It's not only the damage that tariffs create that Trump is doing, but the damage that uncertainty creates. If you don't know about tariffs, you might not invest. You might not expand. You might not, if you're an importer, you certainly might not be investing in building up your business. But an exporter doesn't know what exactly is going to happen because they're going to be the retaliatory tariffs. What are they going to be? Which countries, which products? Uncertainty is not good for the economy. It's not good for business, which is the economy. It's not good for production. It's not good for investment. Now, the only people who don't seem to care are people investing in the stock market, which seems to only go up, although it's down today. It seems to only go up. It's still hitting new highs. But businesses on the ground are not making investments, and that's what we're picking up here. In addition, prices are going up. They're going up in the expectation of the tariff. For example, U.S. aluminum prices spiked as buyers are scrambling for metal in advance of the tariffs. So demand is high right now to try to get as much aluminum into the country as possible because tariffs are coming and they're willing to pay more than they were a month ago. And right now, they can pass additional cost to consumers. And the prospects for U.S. companies significantly increasing aluminum production, that's tough. That's difficult. So there's a reason why the U.S. imports a certain percentage of aluminum. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal today. U.S. aluminum buyers scramble for metal as Trump tariff looms. Imported aluminum accounts for nearly 60% of aluminum used in the U.S. And he just placed a 25% tariff on all aluminum imported into the United States, no matter what country it comes from. So no exclusions, at least not yet. We'll see how the swamp works. The economy is slowing, and Trump knows this. He is already in public statements blaming Biden. He says, it's on me. I just came in. Nothing I did. But it is what he's doing. It's his threats of tariffs are enough to slow the economy down. By the way, and I'm not going to have time to cover this, but I think you guys should check it out if you can. There was a really, really good op-ed today, really, really good editorial today in the Wall Street Journal by Phil Graham. You remember Phil Graham, the senator from Texas, who was quite good, quite free markets. And Donald Boudreaux is an economist, an Austrian economist out of George Mason University. They have written an op-ed. This is the title: Trump's Myth of the Trade Deficit. And they write, economic growth depends on deregulation, tax cuts, and budget deficit, not on the balance of trade. So I highly recommend reading it. Phil Graham is still alive. He must be in his 80s or 90s. I highly recommend reading it. It's a really good analysis, similar to analysis I've done on this issue. It's pretty, in a sense, it's standard economics, but They talk about the fact that people buy dollars in order to invest in America. People sell us goods in order to have dollars so they can invest in America. They talk about all that stuff, and it's why we have a current account surplus and account, so total. If you take in import, exports plus flow of money, everything balances out, which is the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, highly recommended. Trump's Myth of the Trade Deficit, Wall Street Journal, February 20th, so yesterday. Really good op-ed. All right, what else did we want to do? Yes, okay, 2 positive stories. Good stories, good stuff, 2 of them. Tomorrow is today. Today, the Supreme Court is considering the Institute for Justice's petition, asking whether the court should overturn Kelo versus New London. The decision that, was a devastating decision. John Allison responded to it in a very courageous way at the time, but this is from 2004. It's basically a Supreme Court decision that basically said it was okay for the government to use eminent domain to take a private person's property and hand it over to another private entity. In this case, I think it was to build a shopping mall or to build a Walmart or to build something, right? And so basically they legalized that. They said it's fine. Now, I'm against eminent domain for everything. But if we can limit eminent domain so that it has to be shown that it's a government project, at least we limited eminent domain. There's less abuse. And Kelo was suing. Kelo is the owner of the property that was being taken away, paid for, but eminent domain was being used. If the Supreme Court decides to take this on, and if they indeed overturn Kelo versus New London, that's huge. That means you can't just steal people's property. And I consider stealing even if you pay for it, because you do it through force without their consent. You can't steal people's property to build shopping malls, to build parking lots, to build high-rise towers. I don't know about baseball fields if they're privately run. Can't do it. They did that in spades in San Diego when they built the baseball field in San Diego. Took a bunch of private citizens. So, yeah, IJ is fantastic. They're a great organization. Their arguments on Kelo were spot on. And I'm really, really hopeful that the Supreme Court decides to take this on and to at least consider overturning it. Maybe they'll already overturn it, but I think today they'll they'll decide soon. The arguments are today about whether they'll even consider it. So it's a good day for freedom in that sense. Okay. Finally, a great day for science and medicine. Somebody sent me this, I can't remember who sent me this. Somebody sent me this story. It's a great feel-good story. It's a good story to end a pretty depressing show because it also deals with children. There's a gene defect that quite a few children are born with that makes them blind at birth, and it's a genetic problem. Anyway, there's been a massive breakthrough in the UK, of all places, at the Moorfield Eye Hospital, where they have effectively treated the most severe childhood blindness. They do this by injecting healthy copies of the affected gene into the back of one eye to kickstart sensitivity to light. The idea is that the procedure, can become widely available. It's fairly easy to do. They picked 4 children for this. They injected this. All of them had severe retinal dystrophy, known as Leber congenital amaurosis, LCA, which is an inherited condition that causes vision loss due to defect in the AIPL1 gene. And by doing this gene therapy, the children can now identify, can now see shapes, find toys, recognize faces, and in some cases, even read and write. I mean, this is amazing and wonderful and fantastic. And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff we need to hear more of. This is the kind of stuff that I think we're heading towards this kind of a future of gene therapy where we fix genetic defects. We fix them. Now, there's a lot of work being done in fixing them in the womb, although only one experiment on humans was done in China on the woman. It worked, and now we can fix these genetics with people, once they're adults or once they're children. So this is amazing. It's inspiring. Can you imagine being a child who struggled with not seeing anything? And the pictures of these children, I mean, these are very young children, not being able to see anything and then getting an injection and suddenly having light penetrate and starting to see shades. And they're hoping that with treatment and with practice and with everything, their eyesight will be getting better. They'll be able to focus more and they'll be able to see more. It's a really terrific, and this is civilization. This is reason, science, and civilization. This is everything that the people I started off the show with are not, don't have. This is the West. This is what we're fighting for. The ability, the capability, the freedom to do this, to improve human life this way. This is why we fight. If you want to know why we fight, this is why we fight. For this kind of improvement in human life. All right. Lots of other stuff to talk about, but there's next week for that. Okay, I'll remind you all that tomorrow we have an AMA show, Ask Me Anything show. It'll be at 1 p.m. East Coast time, an hour earlier, 1 p.m. East Coast time. We'll have our usual panel on, and then you can come on and ask anything. So that is 1 p.m. East Coast time. What else? Want to remind you that we have a number of sponsors. Alex Epstein, who is a sponsor of the show. Alex is the leading authority in the world, I think, today on fossil fuels, energy, climate change, environmentalism. He writes this Substack where you get his talking points, you get his knowledge distilled to easy principles you can communicate, easy knowledge that you can communicate. Incredible resource for all of you. You can sign up, alexepstein.substack.com, and follow Alex. Also, the Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor of the show, and they are offering right now a discount. For all listeners to the Yaron Brook Show, you can get a discount for auditing Ayn Rand University courses. It's a 10% discount. You use the code YBS, Yaron Brook Show, YBS 10, 10, for 10% discount on auditing. Classes, auditing, you can participate live, you can ask questions, you can go to office hours. You're just not graded. You just don't have homework. But you can get all the other benefits of attending class. Finally, I want to remind everybody that you can support the show on Patreon and on PayPal, where you can become monthly supporters, regular monthly supporters, incredibly valuable. Again, this show is listener supported. Couldn't exist without you guys. The show is funded that way. And also want to remind you, we do have a target for the super chat for the show. Again, this is part of keeping the show going, keeping the show alive. I do a lot of shows. I produce a lot of content. And if you enjoy it, if you gain any value out of it, please consider supporting it. Well, we have a goal, 2-hour shows of $500. We're definitely in the second hour already, so this will definitely be a $500 show. We have made the first hour goal of $250, but we are short about $244 right now. So those of you who can afford and can come in with some, questions, $20, $50, $100 questions, get us past the goal. That'll be amazing, and I will really appreciate that. And finally, we've got 190 people watching. Many of you might not be subscribers to the Yaron Brook Show. Please consider subscribing. Press the subscribe button. If you're on Twitter, please follow me and follow me on Twitter. X, I should say, follow me on X. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube show. Also, like the show before you leave. All right, let's jump in with the Super Chat questions. We have a few. Let me just pull these out to where I can see them most effectively. All right, I start, as always, with the higher priced questions, in this case, $20 questions. We'll start with those. We'll start with Doron has a question. Can we please form a serious third party in the U.S.? The two-party system is failing most Americans, and neither party is being led by serious people. Let's call it the common sense or objectivist party. I mean, the problem with an objectivist party is it would have 2,000 members and it would get 2,001 votes, one by accident. What would be the point of that? You can form a third party, but for a third party to have real influence, it would have to be a centrist party, right? This would have to be a centrist party, which is a neither here nor there party, better than the Republicans, better than the Democrats, but not great, not one we could get enthusiastic about. Any political party that you, Doron, or I could be excited about would fail. And any political party I led would immediately collapse. I've got 39,000 followers. That's not enough for a political party. If I had 5 million followers, we could have a serious discussion. 5 million followers is where you get to the point where, okay, maybe some political activism makes sense. Maybe doing some politics makes sense. So when we can take my following and 100x it, not 10x it, 100x it, then we can have a serious conversation about it. But as long as we're just we're such a small force in terms of voting. It's just, yeah, I know you guys would vote for me. Okay, of the 183 people listening right now, let's say 120 voted for me. I have a feeling 60 are Trump acolytes and wouldn't. But in Puerto Rico, I'm even less popular than I am in Massachusetts, probably. Yeah, it's just not, what's the point? You have to, every political party starts out as a grassroots effort. Every serious, new, innovative, with new ideas political party. You have to start with grassroots efforts, which means you have to change the culture, which means you educate. As I said, 5 million subscribers. That's a goal. 5 million subscribers. Then we've got momentum for a political party. I'm running. I'll run for something. Can't run for president unless Elon Musk gets the Constitution changed so he can run for president, and then I can run against Elon. You have two immigrants running against each other. I would love for you to vote for Yaron. I would love to vote for myself. Ain't happening, guys. Ain't happening. Maybe I can run for dog catcher somewhere, and even then I'd probably lose because I don't like dogs. All right, Mary Aline, do you think any good can come of Macron and Keir Starmer visiting Trump? I don't see how. Trump is a batshit crazy megalomaniac. Yeah, I mean, I don't see what good. They have to come. They have to come kiss the ring. They have to come and say, yes, no, but, no, we admire you, we respect you, we love you, but, you shouldn't be so hard on Zelensky. He's a good guy. That's the game they play. It's the game they play. And none of them want the U.S. to back out of Europe. I think they should want it. I think they should relish the challenge. I think they should embrace it. I think they should plan for it and run with it and do it whether he backs out of Europe or not. Europe should unify around a defense strategy that they fund and they man and they do it. Mary says she actually votes for me. She writes me in. There you go. You all should write me in. Thank you, Mary Eileen. I agree completely. Alexis, what can the hero Zelensky realistically do at this stage? I don't know. I think he what he's doing right now is he's trying to be as nice as he can. So he came out with some compromising statements today about, yes, we need to work with America. We're great friends of America. I will work with the president of the United States to bring this about. I know he cares about peace, and so he's done that. I think what he should do is he should go to Europeans and said, let's unite. Let's unite. You wrote in Walter Block. Oh my God, that's horrible. I wouldn't want Walter Block as president. That would be awful. Anyway, yes. So I think he should go to Germany, France, and the UK, and the Poles. I think Poland is very important here, and basically sit them down and say, we, Europe, have got to find an alternative where we're not dependent on Trump, not in the short run, not in the long run. Not dependent on the United States, not in the short run, not in the long run. So take a leadership position within Europe in terms of trying to arrange it. I don't know if they'll help, but that's all I can think of him doing. And if you've got some strategy in the early spring to take back some significant land from the Russians, do it. Do it. Right? I don't know that such a strategy exists. I always have these ideas, but I'm no military strategist and I have no intelligence on the ground. But if you have it, as soon as the ground is hard enough, do it. That's insane. YouTube says that this is Megan Ribbon's 5th super chat. Can't be. You've done tons of super chats. Maybe with a different handle. Maybe you've changed your handle. Anyway, Alexis also asks, have you heard of Harry Brown's permanent portfolio, 25 each of stock, bonds, gold, and money market? And what do you think of it? I don't think it makes sense. It also, I believe you should adjust your portfolio to your age. So if you're young, you want to have a significant majority in stocks. Gold and money markets are basically cash. They're basically preserving value. They're not growing. So you want to have stocks. You want to have some bonds, but very little. As you approach retirement, you want to have less stocks or different stocks, safer stocks, more dividend-yielding stocks. Maybe when you're young, you want to have a portfolio of growth stocks, and when you're older, you want to have a portfolio of value stocks. So I'm much more about diversification. First of all, why not real estate? Where's real estate in here? I think you should fully diversify, and you should adjust your portfolio. You should adjust your portfolio based on your age. Oh, you're asking for you, Alexis. Who am I to give you investing advice? For you, I would, I'm just thinking where you are positioned in life. I would have, 50% of your savings in value stocks. I'd have some growth. And then I'd have basically cash and short-term bonds, for the rest of it. I'm not a big fan of holding gold, although if you have over the last 2 years, you've done very, very well. So I would do, 60% stocks, 50, again, diversified globally, 50% value, 10% growth. And then the rest I would have in a combination of money markets, or these days high yield saving accounts, and short-term bonds, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have to pay for your kids' expensive education in the future. I'm just thinking you need the cash for that. Shazbot, maybe all children in the future will be conceived via in vitro fertilization in order to implement preventative gene therapy. Sex will become 100% recreational. Yeah, I think that's there's a high likelihood of that. Test tube babies. It's not even sure. It's not even clear that they'd be put back into the womb. That is, they might be developed outside of the womb. Yes, I think that's right. And I think even when, even if they're in the womb, I think that what do you call it? That you can probably do gene therapy in the womb. They'll get to that point. Okay, let me just see. There's breaking news. Okay, supposedly Hamas has now found the body of Shiri Bibas, the mother, and has passed the body on to the Red Cross. And the IDF is on its way. This is literally breaking news from like now. The IDF is on its way to pick up the body. And I don't know, and then they'll I guess analyze the body. They'll do the forensics on the body. So who knows why or what the purpose of these games Hamas is playing is. They could all be psychological, just to piss people off, whatever. But the body's on the way, and now we'll know how she died, and it can't be good. It can't be good. Okay, Noel says, Tickle Me Tucker Carlson must be really tickled these days with his man Putin seems to be winning. Yeah, I'm sure he is. Tucker Carlson must be ecstatic. He, I'm sure, is very, very happy with the way things are going. Basically, it's his version of MAGA that is winning out, not Mark Levin's. Alan, bring the whirlwind of insights. Oh, that's me. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. John, something positive. Loved seeing John Stossel in New York Post, and you were featured. I shared with people I know. Have you gotten any feedback? No, I've gotten no feedback. Zero, zilch, nada. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, that's what Stossel does. He does an interview with you. We spent an hour and a half in front of the camera. And then he splices it up into short videos, and he uses that material. He'll use it for years. And then he'll write an op-ed in the New York Post, and he'll mention you and you cite you and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's great. And then in March, he will publish the entire interview, which I'm looking forward to. But I've added several hundred followers on Twitter because of the promotion the video got on Twitter. Sadly, I have not added subscribers on YouTube from the video I did for Stossel. So I'm not sure why there isn't more crossover from Twitter to YouTube. But maybe it's a different audiences. But yes, expect more to come from Stossel. And then the other thing is Jordan Peterson Academy should be publishing my capitalism course in the next week or so. Or supposedly by the end of the month. We'll see. Michael, twisted Luigi Maggioni fans packed New York City court ahead of United Healthcare CEO murder hearing. Yeah, pretty disgusting. We did that show with Nikos, was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago, about that whole thing. It's just unbelievable that people can be supportive of him. It's, yeah, disgusting. Chris, Trump's actions regarding Russia and Ukraine may be popular with MAGA, but I can't imagine they are popular at all with most Americans. Will that have any impact on his popularity? Will Congress sense that and push back? Well, I mean, polls are showing exactly what you say. Trump's popularity is declining. It's gone down a few points, not dramatically, but a little bit. It's significantly, it's certainly below 50%. It was 47, it's gone down to 45, I think. And he's the one making fun of Zelensky's popularity, but Zelensky's a lot more popular in Ukraine than Trump is in the United States. And even in Congress, I've seen a number of senators now come out really critical of Trump's statements about Zelensky. And, senators who are not typically critical of Trump. So this issue is an issue that a lot of Republicans care about, and a lot of Republican senators care about, and might be willing to stand up to Trump on. James, why are wars in Africa never covered by mainstream news? It appears as race now. It appears to be something different. What do you think? Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. The American people are just not interested. These are not wars that affect Americans, or if they do, they don't see the effect. They're in a faraway place. They usually are no good guys and bad guys. It's usually all bad guys all thugs fighting over treasure, natural resources typically. And, Americans, I think, legitimately just are not interested because nothing's at stake. Like Israel is a civilized country. An American would sympathize with a civilized country under attack by barbarians who've also attacked America, Islamists. Americans get that. The same with Russia. Russia's always been, or a long time been, an enemy of the United States. It was the Soviet Union. They attack a country turning to the West, trying to become more Western, trying to become more like America, trying to be an American ally. That is something they relate to. That's directly. But they are rebels. They are, Tutsi rebels in the Congo fighting the Hutsis, and it has to do somewhat with the massacre that happened in Rwanda years ago, and the government in the Congo. I don't even know what the government in the Congo is, and it's certainly not a good government. And then that's only one rebel group. There are numerous other rebel groups, and none of them stand for freedom, liberty, civilization. So why be interested in it? So I understand why the mainstream media doesn't cover it. It's just not of interest. It doesn't relate to the life of Americans, whereas events in Israel, events in Europe, even events in Asia, because we're such big trading partners, do relate. As Africa becomes more civilized, as Africa becomes wealthier, as Africa becomes more producer and a trader, people will cover these wars more. Esoteric, so I don't think it's about race. Esoteric dichotomy. Hey, Yaron, how hard would it be to return to a gold standard? How long would a healthy transition take? How would it affect investing? Thank you. I don't think it would be that hard to return to a central bank-based gold standard. And then the next step would be to convert that to a free banking gold standard, which was a lot more complicated. A gold standard for the central bank would require a number of new laws, but it could be done probably in 2 years. In a couple of years, it would require a period where the dollar-gold rate adjusts, let the market adjust. It required the ability to literally exchange money for gold. It would require, we'd have to find out how much gold is in Fort Knox, how much America government or the Federal Reserve has in gold. It would require certain logistics, but it wouldn't be that hard. To go to a fully free banking system would probably require at least 4 years, complete rewriting of banking laws, complete deregulation of banking, and that's complicated given what we have on the books today. That is going to take time and complexity because you want to do it right. You want to do it in the right order. I talked about that a little bit when I talked about financial deregulation. You want to do it in the right order. Not easy, not simple. Bradley, best defense stocks or ETFs? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not an active investor. I don't invest. I used to, but only in a particular sector. And my own money is in, is not in any sector. The only like investment I made outside of kind of a diversified portfolio was I bought an Argentinian ETF. Sometime last year because of Milei. It was up 30-something% in 6 months. But other than that, I don't dabble in individual stocks or individual ETFs. Rafael, would you like to see Vitaly Klitschko, Kiev's mayor, as president of Ukraine? He projects more strength, and Trump is moved by it. I would have to look into him more closely. I do think he'd be good. I think he's definitely a hater of the Russians and is a fighter for the Russians and has been very responsible in terms of talking about the fact that no, Ukraine shouldn't have elections now. It needs to win the war first and all of that. And he supported Zelensky when Zelensky needed it, but he doesn't like Zelensky, right? He's a real opponent of Zelensky. So I don't know enough about him, but maybe he'd definitely be an option, and he's considered a real possibility. But the reality is that if you have elections in Ukraine under the current or future or potentially future circumstances, they will be manipulated by the Russians. And then who knows who will get elected? A puppet. Robert, support your local voice of reason. Yes, support me, your local voice of reason. And don't forget to like and share. It's free, and it shows your friends that you're passionate about your values. Don't forget also to subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe. Just press the button. It's easy. Doesn't cost you anything. Enric, have a good weekend. Thank you, Enric. I appreciate it. Hamad, there's a push in CPAC, and in particular from Bannon, for a third term. Yeah, I saw that. There's a whole organization now set up for a third term for Trump. Trump has talked about it. So yes, there's going to be a push. How they get around the 20th Amendment? Or 22nd, I don't know. But there is definitely a push. Let's see, Megan. At Philosophy at Work, I would probably sequence your Mars samples even if you contaminated them. All right. Holden. Charlie Cook is coming to my city. Should I grill him on tariffs? Great show, by the way. I don't know what the point would be. Who are you trying to convince? Would he give you... He's very articulate. Would he give you the opportunity to convince? He's also not going to argue with you fairly. He's going to create straw man. He's going to talk about national security when it has nothing to do with national security. He'll talk about nonsense. He'll talk around you. But you can if you want to just practice. If you're going to do that, I would definitely read the op-ed I mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. Give you some pointers. Nev fell. Those who call Ukraine an aggressor make me wish that hell existed. Their only weapon are narcissistic gaslighting and they're mindless worshippers. I'm glad I'm glad you're standing by Ukraine. Yes, of course I'm standing by Ukraine. All right, Greg, thank you for the sticker. Barbara, thank you for the sticker. And I think there were stickers way in the beginning. Wait. Let me just go. Mary, thank you for the sticker. John says, let's see. Let me just do the stickers. Mary Aline, John Parker, and Arum, and Mike, and Jonathan Harper, and Martin, and Oscar, and Oyvind, and Carolina, and Batal, and you, whatever I can't pronounce, sorry, and Mary, and Eyal, and I think I captured everybody, Greg and Barbara. John says, wanted an AI trained on U.S. law regs in order to devise best legal changes. and in which order to transition to a fully free economic system. Good idea. I like that. Because I think there's probably an AI that's already trained on the content. Now we just have to find out who's got it, the AI, and then figure out how to, maybe LexisNexis, which is the database of all the legal publications and all the legal stuff. All right, we're like $118 short of our 2-hour goal, and we just hit 2 hours, but we're going to end it here. If anybody wants to jump in with some stickers while I wrap up the show, that would be great. You can also, of course, go to Patreon and become a subscriber. That's even better. Or go to PayPal and become a subscriber. But, Patreon is amazing. Yes, I appreciate all of the support from all the stickers and the super chatters. Thank you to all the listeners and subscribers and likers and chatters and commentators and all of you who interact with me on YouTube. I appreciate all of you. Tomorrow, AMA, 1 p.m. East Coast time. Those of you who contribute over $25 a month on one of the platforms should have received the URL to join by Zoom. The rest of you, I will see you here on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or wherever you listen to the show. Thank you, Hamad. Thank you for the sticker. Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for the sticker. Thanks for chipping away at the goal here towards the end. I very much appreciate that. And let us call it. Oh, and Tessa came in with another $10. Thank you, Tessa. Thank you. And at this rate, we're going to drop under $100 shortfall. We can live with that. AMA tomorrow, and I'll see you Monday if you're not going to be at the AMA. Bye, everybody.